Welcome to A Lunch with Biggie, a podcast about small business and creatives sharing their stories and inspiring you. My guest today started this journey as an outlet to share her creativity while living in Cambodia. She came back stateside in 2020 and turned it into a business full-time. Please welcome the creative freelancer and owner of the SoulShine Co, Natalia Skeba. What's going on, Natalia?
Hey, Biggie. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. Thank you so much for spending a lunch break with me. I really appreciate it.
I'm really happy to be here.
So tell me, what's your go-to lunch or sandwich? What's your usual like go-to lunch sandwich type thing?
So, typically, I'm an open-faced sandwich type of person.
Okay.
I love my toast. I love my little condiments and accoutrements, but I do have a go-to sandwich for you today.
Okay.
My mother's Bolivian. Have you heard sandwich de pavita?
Is that like a turkey sandwich, pavita?
So, pavo is turkey, of
Yeah.
course, but Bolivian street sandwich.
Oh, I want to know about this. What's in this sandwich?
So, this is very nostalgic, and this is how my mom makes it. But of course, since it's a street food, it varies all over the country. My mom makes it with rotisserie chicken, and even though it's pavita, it's mainly rotisserie chicken all around Bolivia too. She mixes it with mayo, black pepper, and salt. Very basic, kind of like a chicken
Like a
salad.
chicken salad. Okay.
Yeah. And then she overlays really thin cucumbers, really thin slices of tomato, more pepper, more salt, and a slice of cheese. She uses all different types of cheeses, and that's where the fun part comes. And then it's on ciabatta bread that's
Oh,
toasted.
okay.
And what's really important about that is that you take all of the stuffing out, so it's a really crunchy toasted bread and beautiful sandwich.
That is delicious. And it's funny, I'm gonna definitely make one of these because we buy a lot of rotisserie chicken and we'll usually like debone it and have it for like different things. And we sometimes will make we'll make a simple chicken salad. So like the next time I actually have chicken salad in my fridge right now. I just have to buy some ciabatta bread to try this. And I love the idea of, you said it's pickles and tomatoes, or tomatoes and
Cucumbers.
cucumbers. Yes.
Yes.
And I like the fact that you even told me that you guys season the tomato and the cucumber, because
Hmm.
I always like to ask that question, like, hey, do you season your veggies? So that is definitely a good one. Out of curiosity, since you say you like them open face, what
Hmm.
is a typical open face sandwich that you usually will have?
Okay, so I do this pretty much every morning for breakfast. It's been my hyperfixation for a few years, so maybe it's not even a hyperfixation at this point.
It's just
I
natural
love
routine for you.
it is. I love sourdough bread. Um, my friend Kim, who lives down the street, makes beautiful loaves for me. I feel very, very special that she gives me her bread. I need to learn myself, but I do a toast of sourdough, and then I do queso blanco and really thin slices of tomato, and then I make pickled onions with sushi vinegar. Again, very
Yes.
specific.
Yes. No, this is like, and I was hoping you were going to tell me this when you were telling me about the pavito, that was going to have like some onion or something like that. But okay, I love that. I'm loving that.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah. No, I love
Sometimes
it.
I'll put an egg on it,
Yeah,
and sometimes I'll put a little bit of avocado on it, but
I
that's
was going to ask.
basically the gist of the toast.
No, I love that. I think that's great. And obviously I know a lot of people, and I've been asking this question now, and like, is there, besides that, like like, is that usually a lunch or a breakfast? What you're talking about?
The open face sandwich, or open face, the
Yeah.
toast is
Yeah, the toast.
breakfast for me.
Okay.
I typically have late breakfast, so my lunches, my eating schedule is really weird, but the sandwich de pavita,
Yeah.
best on a beach, and always, always, always with a Diet Coke.
Okay, a cold
So
Diet Coke. I gotcha.
yeah,
I
a
love it.
cold, crispy Coke.
I love it. I love it. No, that I like how it's specific, and I like the idea that it's beach, especially since if it's toasted. Like I'm a big fan of that with a sandwich. It's got to have like that toastedness, because especially if you're going to travel with it, it'll hold a little better. So I totally get that. All right, so obviously I could talk sandwiches all day, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about the SoulShine Co. So I kind of want to know how. I know I kind of talked a little bit about it in the intro, but like, how did the whole SoulShine Co. come about and start?
All right, so I'm going to try to keep this short and concise, and we can loop back to
Okay.
whatever part. But it first started as an outlet to share my creative endeavors. I was living and working in Cambodia, and I actually returned there after 20 years. I grew up there.
Wow.
And I was helping out a family friend run and manage her business. My background is in marketing and communications. That's what I studied in college. And so I was in my early 20s, kind of running around with like a chicken with its head cut off, and really just diving in headfirst with my family friend Annie and full fledged operating a whole boutique hostel in the hospitality realm in Siem
Wow.
Reap, Cambodia. So I was there for a few years prior to 2020, and it's a really small town there. And I quickly became part of this expat community. It was beautiful. It was something that I had never experienced before. And there were so many lovely doers and shakers, a lot of people that were starting social enterprises and doing really incredible work for the Cambodian people. I was working for my friend who is Australian, Alana. She owned 4 different social enterprises, and I started picking up freelance gigs with her again in the marketing realm. But I have always been a creative. So every single position that I've been in, anything that I've done, I've always had to sprinkle a little creativity in there. And slowly but surely, I started getting hired for more side gigs doing creative work like signage, little logo jobs, this and that. And I loved it. That's where I came alive. And so the SoulShine Co. was marinating for years. I always wanted to have a place to share my work, but little little imposter syndrome kept on flaring up. And finally, I just got sick of it and I ripped the band aid off. And it was because of some very encouraging friends that helped me brainstorm the title, just helped me, get over my own self. And I just put it out into the world at the beginning of February 2020. So it wasn't COVID just yet, but that was right around the corner.
Yeah, literally at the cusp of it.
Right at the cusp, I put it out into the world and I had all these ideas of what it could be because, again, I was really embedded in the community there. And I had ideas of social, maybe making it into a social enterprise one day, but really wanted to do some community driven events and gatherings and creative workshops. But then 2020 happened. And my mother had some health issues, and I'm an only child. So there was a no brainer to book a one-way ticket back stateside. So Orlando, I really never thought that I would be here. My arrow was spinning. I grew up moving around a whole lot, like 11 times total as a child. So
Wow.
I had it kind of in the fabric of my being to like move every 2 years and to get itchy feet. And I wanted to stay in Cambodia, maybe go somewhere else within Cambodia,
Yeah.
maybe Australia. I had all these different ideas. But here, 2020 just brought me right here. And, it shook the whole world. So I was in this position where I put this creative, outlet out into the world, and it gave me the opportunity to just hone in and continue to create, continue to share. And at first, it didn't feel natural to me because it felt scary, sharing your work as an artist, as a creative. It's like sharing your baby to the world. And I just kept on continuing to share. and it started to grow. It started to snowball. At first, I was back stateside without a job. So I was doing commissions during lockdown, commissions for portraits, for pet portraits. I was doing logos on the side. I was just doing anything that anyone asked. I said yes. I am a yes woman at heart, and I said yes to everything. Um, then I decided to start selling stickers and prints on Etsy. Started really, really small, and that started to grow. And then as, you know, Florida started opening up again, I really wanted to find where the community was here. And I went to markets. I went to House on Lang for like a painting event first, and then I heard that there was a little pop up coming up, or like during that weekend. So I went. I met Jen Michelle, who did the Pink House pop ups, and then she told me you should totally try it. So I I then started doing my own markets. I think it was August 2022. So that's pretty wild. And then I opened my own website and then started wholesaling. And here we are right now.
Yeah, that so let me ask you, I'm just kind of curious, can you said when you put it out there in 2020, was that like a Instagram post that you put it out there? I believe it was, right? Is that correct? That you're like, "Hey, I'm going to
Mhm.
put this out into the world," cuz you did that, you did it again cuz and we'll talk about like where you've evolved now to like have your own space and stuff like that. So, but I want you to kind of give someone, if as they're listening to this, they're probably on, they're probably going on, scrolling on their phones. They're probably looking at what is exactly the SoulShine Co. Give people an idea, because I obviously, I look at your brand and I love how you write it, because it's true. It's intentional. Like, you make things you want to hear, and you want to see, and you hear. And I want to tell you that is like you hit it, because um I read like I have to, because I always tell my wife and my daughter like who I'm going to interview. And so a lot of times I'll be like, "Hey, this is who I'm interviewing." And I literally was like, I told my daughter and my wife, I was like, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to tell you right now." I'm like, cuz my wife and my daughter know, like, they can pretty much, they don't, they use the quote, and I'm putting air quotes, like, "Oh, but it's small business." I don't really care. Like, I could care less. Like you can support, like, if any of my guests, if they want to buy something from any small business that they want to buy from, I never say no, you can't buy it. But I
Mhm.
told them, I said, "Oh, you're gonna want to buy some of these things, because like these quotes are gonna hit you guys, like, are gonna hit, like she's eating on these." I'm like, they're gonna hit home. So I told my daughter, I was like, "Well, if you want to buy one, after you want to check out the website and buy one," I'm like, we should definitely do that, because I want to talk a little bit about what, like, where the inspiration comes from, where you're getting it, where, like, what do you, I guess, like, what hits, like, what do you like, "Hey, I want to make this a print. I don't want to make this a print," or like, "Oh my God, this is what I need to hear this. I need to now share this."
Well, like you said, I always say this, I create what I want to see and need to hear. So a lot of the times it starts by journaling. I always have a piece of paper or notebooks around the house in my
Yep.
bag all the time. It could be to capture a fleeting thought. It could be just to ramble down a particular feeling that I'm feeling that I just want to like feel and then move on from. And it's so funny how you can easily get into a conversation with yourself when you put pen to paper. And it has been such a life-changing thing for me to implement journaling in my life. I started back in high school, so well over 10 years ago. And and that's where a lot of the inspiration bubbles. So I can be in a really bad headspace. I can be mired in imposter syndrome, in comparison, or just going through some really heavy time in life where I need to grasp onto some words just as like a lifeboat. And so that's kind of where it starts, is just words in my journal or words on post-it notes that I plop right here on my laptop or above my desk. And whenever I when I see those words to soothe my own self, I know that most likely the rest of the world will need to hear those too, because we're all humans navigating very similar experiences at the
Yeah.
same time. So that's where a lot of it starts. And, sometimes I start with the phrase, the quote in mind, and then I create. Or sometimes I just get lost into the creative flow with, creating shapes on a canvas, my sketchbook, whatever surface I'm working on, and then I add the words to it. So it just depends on the day. There's no solid reason why.
Yeah.
It's just the creative force that you get into.
No, and I think that's great, and I also love the fact, like, and in telling your story, I think that's something that's very important, is the fact that you kind of, it's kind of been like a ramp up, like, type of thing. Like, you've taken small steps. Like, you're like, hey, I first started, doing some designs, and then I started doing stickers, and then I started doing prints, and then I went to Etsy, and then I decided to do pop up. Like, and that's kind of how it should be. Like, it's like it makes it a little bit less scary
Mhm.
when that happens. I also think it's a great way because it's a cost effective way of being able to do things. It's a lot more expensive. Like, in my world of t-shirts, it's like that is a heavy expensive thing. But to be able to print and do stickers and do prints, like, that is a great way to be able to kind of show your artistic abilities and your creativity, and get it out into the world. So I definitely think that's something I love, and I love seeing when people use that, go that route, because you also do postcards and greeting cards. So you provide so many different ways of being able to share your message, and the different messages that that you've kind of have and you share. um, did you have an artistic, like, I'm kind of curious, like, did you have an artistic inspiration or someone that inspired you to be, like, into that artistic side, of you?
Yes, I absolutely do. One of my earliest inspirations was my cousin Georgette, who tragically passed last year, but she will forever be so important in my heart and in my whole business. I was 8 years old and went to Chicago for the first time to visit her with my mom and my aunt. And she was at the time studying at the Chicago Institute of Art. And she was excited to greet us, and she greeted me with my first big girl sketchbook. So I thought that was so powerful. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. She gave me the sketchbook and some really cool pencils and pens, and it just was like the door to my creative interest. I've always been creatively inclined. You could see pictures from when I was a kid with paintbrushes. That's all I ever wanted to do was paint and create. So it just felt really riveting to get that as a gift. She was a beautiful painter, and she really shined with mixed media. And I I because of that, I loved painting and I loved mixed media, and I
I was
still
gonna
do to
say,
this
I
day.
could see those inspirations of that in your design, so that's awesome.
Yeah, so she was a huge inspiration. I always thought she was the coolest person. She had whenever I would visit her too, she would just have all of these beautiful art books, and I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. I was very lucky to inherit a lot of them. And yeah, so I can't think of an inspiration without thinking about her,
I
um,
love that. I
at a
love that.
very big early age.
The business side of stuff. Did you have were you always entrepreneurial? Did you have people in your life that were entrepreneurial that, like, kind of like led that? Because that's a tough one to go and be like, hey, I want to do freelance. I want to do, like, when it comes to stuff like that. I mean, and I think it's amazing the fact that how you started with the fact that you're like, hey, I'm helping a friend using my degree with my knowledge and being able to go that route, and then be able to then be like, hey, what other ways can I do and do that. The hustle is definitely real there. But I was kind of curious, did you have other inspirations as well for entrepreneurial side of on the entrepreneurial side of the thing of the house?
Absolutely. So I will say there's two components to this because there are a lot of entrepreneurial spirits in my family and my friends growing up. But I think that the biggest thing to me is going down a different path that is not the social norm has always been right in front of my face. So, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Southeast Asia, and my dad was in the army there working on demining initiatives in the country. So, I was there from 1998 to 2005, going back and forth from Southeast Asia to the States. And so I always felt like a little bit of a black sheep going into, different classrooms. It always just felt like an uprooting and a rattling, and I never really could see completely eye to eye with a lot of my classmates whenever I would come back to the States, right? Because it's just such a different type
Yeah.
of environment. International school was so different. It still is a developing country. So I, because of that, I had friends of all different types of nationalities. Their parents were doing so many different type of like incredible work. Again, NGOs, social enterprises, diplomatic work, whatnot. So I grew up in that sort of environment with like a path that is not like your typical 9 to 5 here in the
Yeah.
States. And I never really wanted to do that. I was very allergic to the thought of that. Anytime that I dabbled in that, I would just kind of shake myself out of it. So again, going back to the entrepreneurial spirits that I was raised up with, my grandmother's brother, my uncle Sam, had a photography studio in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was a very well known photography studio, especially at that time, because in this day and age we're bombarded by our phones and like quick snaps of pictures, but back then studios were very
Yeah.
important. So I would say like my first experience of seeing someone get really successful with doing something, especially like in a creative,
Creative.
artsy lane,
Yeah.
was my uncle Sam. And he really, really inspired me. I think photography was one of my first loves whenever I think about like my adolescence and when my creativity like really started, you know, just picking up.
Yeah.
Photography was it, and I had my uncle Sam to really look up to.
That's that I love that. I think that's so great. And I'm always intrigued by that because like I do think to a degree there's always someone that kind of helps dictate or not even dictate but inspire you on on like these entrepreneurial journeys when you're trying to be, especially when you're a creative. Because like you said, and I think it's so true when you're an artist and you're putting out like, and like you said, it's like your baby, you're putting out your ideas and your love and this is my work. It's very vulnerable. So there's a lot of courage that needs to be involved because you're like, well, what if no one likes it? I love it, but what if no one likes it? So I definitely love hearing stories like this. um did you go to college, since you were going back and forth? When you went to college, do you go to college in Cambodia or did you go to college in the US? How did you play that? Because obviously during those years back and forth all the time, like were you doing online classes? What how did you go about doing all that?
All right, so let me clear up the timeline a little
Yes.
bit here. So, from 98 to 2005, we were in Southeast Asia in Cambodia. Then we moved to Michigan, middle of nowhere, Michigan, for 2 years, where I
Wow.
did middle school. I actually loved it, and I have such dear friends from that time in my life.
Yeah.
They're my best friends. And then I moved to Williamsburg, Virginia, and I was there from eighth grade to my senior year, and that's where I graduated. Um, right after that, I went to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, which is a small liberal arts
The Dukes,
college.
is that what they are? The Dukes?
They are the Dukes. They
Yeah.
are the Dukes. Go Dukes. And then right after that, I decided to book a one way to Italy. And my first job out of college was with a travel company. And I did that for a year, and then I went to Cambodia up until 2020. So that's the whole timeline of
Wow.
my life.
No, that's amazing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about. I was kind of curious. Obviously, I know your cousin influence on the artistic side, but I'm kind of
Hmm.
curious on like when we're looking at this, like how I'm trying to figure out like okay, so living in your time in Cambodia, like how did that influence your art style? Like using that like your current style, and I know obviously the mixed media with as well from like your cousin, but like did that help also kind of curate your style? Like how would you explain your design style when someone like when you're talking about like when people see your brand and stuff like that, how do you describe that?
Okay, so there are a few things that I want to touch on that. So, how would I describe my style? I I always go by feeling, right? So
Yeah.
I always want people looking at my art to feel like they're taking a deep breath of fresh air. That's what I
Okay.
always say.
I love it.
And I get inspired by nature, color palettes. I like to go where my eye is drawn, but it is so easy to gain inspiration by just stepping outside and noticing. And that's how I get my inspiration too. But it's really difficult to describe your own style. I would say that I have some contemporary yet nostalgic influence. Um, what was the first question that you
Oh, I
asked?
was
Because
I
I want
was
to
curious
definitely touch
about
on that.
like yeah, I was curious about like your time in Cambodia and like the
Okay.
Southeast, like the influencing of the art. Like, did that time there, especially like during since you were like that was the last period before you moved. Did that has that inspired you at all? Is there some inspiration from that?
Definitely. So it's so funny that you would ask that too, because in high school, especially whenever I was honing in on my interest in the arts, like I would have all these projects, and it was so easy for me to just lean into my upbringing in Southeast Asia. So my art teachers would always say this is very reminiscent of Southeast Asian art. So like with the organic shapes, and I was so interested growing up in creating mandalas. And I still, you can kind of see that shine in different pieces of my work too. But the way that I create objects that merge and work into one piece as if it's a big puzzle. I think that is hugely reminiscent and seen on temples, on just ancient arts. And so there is no denying that there is influence in every aspect of
Yeah.
my being and my art as well.
No, and I totally see that, and that's why I wanted to ask because I was like I saw elements of that, and I was just like, man, I'm like, I was like, there's got to be, but I'm like, but what do I know? I'm not. I say I'm like I'm one of those where I'm like I'm a doodler, so I am
Uh-huh.
not like the full on. So like where I'm doing so in that sense, that's why I'm like okay, well let me at least. But I am a creative, and I know that, so therefore I see things in that way. Um, you made a comment, and I'm kind of curious on. So I know you journal, and I
Hmm.
know that you also made a comment about sometimes like when you put your phone down and you go outside and you kind of look and stuff like that. So are these common practices that you follow or you do? Like do you have certain I don't know daily routines that you do? Obviously I love the fact that you have notebooks everywhere because when you never know when an idea is going to come or how you're going to feel. I've never written down feelings, but I'm going to start because I kind of got away from journaling. I have like I did some kind of journaling and like gratitude and stuff like that. And I kind of gone away from it and I noticed that it's affected how I feel. So I'm going
Hmm.
back to it. But I'm kind of curious, like what do you have daily routines of like things that you do? to kind of help you kind of almost keep yourself centered?
Absolutely. So when it is not horrifically hot outside,
Yeah.
I start each morning with a walk, and that's just my way to start the day. I love going outside. I live in Lake Eola Heights, so it's just such a beautiful neighborhood. I'm part of the community garden here now too, so I get to garden in the mornings, pull out the weeds, look at all the things that are growing. That is such a beautiful source of inspiration, but a way to ground and start my day. I cannot wait for this weather to not be so hot to go back to that because it is truly my favorite part of the day. Um, and then to circle back on the journaling component, in a very present way, I started a group to navigate The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
No.
Okay, this is really cool, and I think this
Yeah.
will be beneficial to anyone listening too.
Heck
So
yeah.
it's basically a 12-week course. It's a book. It was written in I think the late 80s, early 90s by Julia Cameron, and it is a course on getting out of a creative rut and to expanding into like creative freedom. And every week there's a different subject, but there are two practices that really ground you into the 12 weeks, and it is called morning pages. And it is an artist date that you take you as the artist out on a solo day to do whatever. It might be to go to a new museum. It might be to just go out and do something with your hands, go make a new dish from a cookbook that has been collecting dust. So those two practices, especially in the past 12 weeks, we are on our final week this week, and it's making me very emotional. But that has been so grounding and a way to start the day. It's like you brain dump everything that is swirling around in your mind, and it is whenever you miss it, you can really see how that is just such a relieving and uplifting thing to start your day with.
I love that. That is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that's so I love and I love the fact that you have, and that's why I was kind of curious because I do know I you sometimes need to. It's very easy to get stuck and do zombie scroll on your phone. Very
Hmm.
easy that, or get stuck on Netflix and just watch Netflix and whatever. But to be able to be outside, that human component of being outside, that component of being one with nature, like those are I would say like fundamental things that all humans need to be able to do that we don't do, unfortunately. Like the idea of being outside, the idea of some form of exercise, the idea of also being part of that nature and seeing nature and being able to breathe in the air and kind of just see what's out there and maybe, you know, get away from your, outside of your mind and kind of see what's out there. The kind of like the idea of like stopping and smelling the roses type
Yes.
of idea. So I think I love that you do these things, and I figured you would do something like this, especially when you start talking. But and I love the 12-week course idea of doing something like that. I think, is this something you did like with a few of your friends? Or you guys did it as a group? Is it something you're going to be doing again in the future? I'm just kind of curious about that.
So yeah, this has truly been one of the most special things of this year to me, anyways. I tried this book several times in the past, but I would consistently stop on week two. So I very selfishly put this group together because I needed accountability.
Yeah. No, I
um,
love it.
and and it really organically was brought together. The book kept on getting brought up in conversation with a few friends out in the wild, but also down at like a dinner party. It just kept on being brought up, and so I said, okay, enough with this. I'm going to put a group together. So it was a group of 8 girls, seven of us here in Orlando, and then one of my friends, Jess, in Tucson. But we created this this group message. And the seven of us here in Orlando, we would meet up every 4 weeks, and we would kind of treat it as like a book club meeting, but also a meeting to just create and to gather. And it has been so special because, you know, with all of these things, it's going to be imperfect. Sometimes you're going to miss out on a week of morning pages. Sometimes you don't take yourself out on a artist date. But the number one rule was to take the rigidity away and to be open to the experience for what it is. And it has been really beautiful to witness everyone's experience, but then also see the changes within me as well, because
Yeah,
it's like these prompts that you have to journal about, and these little tasks, she calls them, that you have to do, they rattle you, they make you think back on childhood stuff, they make you reach out to certain people. It's a really, really wonderful book.
I love it. I love it. We're definitely going to include it in the show notes, so the people can go check it out, and
Cool.
see that. So I know you do stuff for, you know, you kind of, you help help others with, as part of your as part of your brand, you do help others with branding and content creating. I kind of wanted to get a little bit of like general or like favorite tips, things that you've noticed from when you're working with clients, things that you kind of are like, hey, this is like a constant missing the mark thing that maybe is being overlooked, not considered. Is there anything like that, that maybe some advice, some tips, suggestions that as a small brand, maybe people are forgetting and not doing, that maybe they should kind of think about when they're either creating content or just as a brand itself, or kind of build their business?
Hmm. I would say create for yourself first. So this is not on a client level,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
this is speaking to anyone who is running their own business. Um, of course, like, you need to have your ideal client in mind, and you need to figure out your niche. But I think when you create out of a place of genuine free flow, and a place where it just it's very easy and effortlessly happening, that's the sweet spot. And it doesn't always happen always, but um I think you can always tell what is genuine and what is like fake, or what is created for another person in mind, right? So I think you need to always hone in on your why, on your purpose, and always loop back to that. Because when you are creating out of a place of comparison, or out of a place of, oh, I need to be doing what this person is doing, or I'm not where I'm at, and look at how successful they are. You can so palpably see it and feel it on a consumer end. That's what I would say.
No, I mean, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. Um, is there one saying out of all the things, like what was the first, so this is kind of like, I'm kind of curious on what's been the most popular print, or like, you know, saying print design, and then also what's been the most like and then out of curiosity, if you remember what your first one was, and if they might be the same, they may be the same answer, but I'm just kind of curious, like was there one that's kind of like, wow, this one really hit, like people really took to this one, and then also is there like, hey, this one is maybe this is my favorite because maybe it was one of my first ones, or one of the first ideas I had. I'm kind of curious, so that way people can share it, maybe see it, maybe even buy it on the website, on the SoulShine Co website.
Okay, what a great question. I When it comes to the most popular one, it's so funny, and I oftentimes mention this because you never know where the algorithm is going to take you. And I created, again, this was just through my journal, and my piece that is, all I can do is all I can do, and that is enough. I would say that is the most popular. It it was the most simple thing to put together, because it was a light bulb moment. I need to share this out into the world, and I created something really quick, without thinking. Compared to other pieces that I make, I mull over it, I let it marinate, I overthink about it. I have so many different versions of it. I get lost in the whole like, oh, it's not
Analysis
perfect
of
enough.
paralysis. Yep.
Exactly. But this one, it was just boom, 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 post. And that thing went viral. It was so funny. I was having friends from all over the world taking screenshots of like random celebrities reposting it, and it just went viral. And this is a really interesting story too, because I had a really like small but mighty following. It was not small by any means. It was like 5,000, and that was really really precious to me. But this one post went viral, and every time that I would refresh my phone, I would get like thousands of followers. So like I bumped up like maybe 20K. At that point I
Wow.
was like maybe at 10, and then it was 20, and I kept on like following that momentum. And it was a little bit rattling to me because it felt like it was like the whole world looking in on tiny little me. And I wasn't quite ready for it, but that brought on amazing opportunities. And I am very grateful for that. But again, it is something so it's something that I continuously need to remind myself is to not take things so seriously. They're graphics, and a lot of them are from the heart, but I don't need to spend hours, you know, trying to perfect each piece. So that is the most popular. My first, I am thinking I will have to double check this. There's hundreds of posts to like look back into the archive, but I think my first post ever was jump in to jump in with 2 feet,
I
which
love it.
is a saying that I was raised up by with all the moves. And it is something that really was at the forefront of my mind whenever I started the SoulShine Co. was to jump in with 2 feet. And I thought that was a really special way to start, is with something that has been one of the most important lesson in my life, but
Yep.
also very resonant of putting my work out there with 2 feet.
That is I love it. I love both of those. Those are so great. And I also love the fact that you how you're you being honest with us in the sense that it's amazing how sometimes the ones that like that hit are the ones that you're like I didn't even expect it. I just wanted to do it and I did it and it just kind of happened. And I think that's like, and then of course then it becomes hard because then you're like I want to recreate that again, or obviously everyone always wants to recreate it, and then you're like, and then it's kind of you go back and like and then it's like a little bit of a struggle sometimes when you kind of go that route, because I do know and I can only imagine as an artist you can stare at something and there's probably probably designs and things that you've already printed and created that you go back to and you're like, oh, I should have done this, or maybe if I would have moved this, or maybe this color scheme would have done this. You always can like over second guess yourself. It's always
Mm-hmm.
very easy to do that, and especially when you're a creative. So I love that. I think that's so great. Um, one thing that I know you did, and I want to say I think it was this year, and I could be wrong. Um, but you got your own like kind of like your own space, right? Like your own
Mm-hmm.
area for like you be able to kind of like your own creative outlet and be your own space. Tell me a little bit about how that kind of came about. And then at the same time, when speaking, since it's an outlet, since design and art was an outlet, you use it as an outlet. What is your outlet now?
Okay. Well, to first speak on the studio, that was a big shiny goal of mine for quite some time. I live with my boyfriend in a two-bedroom apartment, and I Soulshine was being solely operated in this two-bedroom apartment. You could see my stuff in every corner of the place, and it wasn't really fair to be
Yeah.
quite honest. My boyfriend works from home, I work from
Okay.
home, so it was a lot to manage, and it worked for the longest time. You gotta start somewhere, and it was just time to start looking elsewhere. So, I finally got my studio. It happened very beautifully. I'm in College Park. It is quite temporary, so I'm kind of putting my feelers out because it is going to be under construction. I don't know when, but definitely eventually. But I basically just wanted to separate work from home. Again, I was fulfilling orders on my bed. I had like hundreds of orders to be fulfilled like on my bed, and there wasn't really any other surface other than my dining room table and my bed. So it was just important to make that separation. And right now I'm using it as a creative space, but mainly a fulfillment center because my wholesale is growing, which was another goal of mine, is to really hone this year was to hone in on the wholesale aspect. And so it has been wonderful to make that separation. It's been great for, I think, my work, my sanity, and my relationship too.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I
um,
bet he's excited. I bet he's pretty excited as well.
yeah, so very exciting, and I don't think I can ever go back to bringing my work in home. So we'll see. Maybe that'll change if we have an extra room. I think that would be a very different story.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
as of right now, where we are, there's no going back to bringing all my stuff here.
For sure. And what about creative outlet now? What's your creative outlet, or what's your outlet now, since your creative outlet became your business? What is it now? What do you do, like when you disconnect, or just your outlet itself?
So I briefly mentioned gardening. My friend Kim and I share a garden plot down the street, and that has been one of the biggest joys, alongside the artist's way this year. It has been such a grounding thing, as I said, with my morning walks, but to see something grow from seed into something that you can eat or display as in florals on the table, has just been really, really a wonderful outlet. And then kind of along the same vein is flower arrangements. I It is very clear that I love flowers in my work. There is a no-brainer there, but I have been loving making my own bouquets and arrangements, gifting them for friends and family for special occasions. But that's another outlet of mine. It brings me into the present moment. It is extremely creative. From going to buy the flowers, seeing the colors work together, and to then putting them in an arrangement and to see how the different shapes, work together. That has been such a fun outlet for me.
That's awesome. I love that. What are you planting in the garden? Like, what are you mentioned some seeds to eat, to feed, or to eat. I'm kind of curious what you got in the garden.
So right now our plot is still rising, and we'll be able to plant here in the next few weeks. But we're going really heavy on the flowers this
Okay.
upcoming season. Again, I just that's where my interests undeniably are. A lot of edible flowers. My boyfriend got a plot next to us because he got jealous last season. So he's doing a lot of the veggies and the
Awesome.
greens, but we're gonna pop in with a lot of beautiful flowers and tomatoes. I am a tomato person, and we are going to plant four different varietals. So
Nice.
that's where we're headed in the fall is
I love
flowers
it.
and tomatoes.
No, I think that's great, and I love that. You mentioned, I got a few more questions for you. One is, you mentioned wholesale, because I can you tell me a little bit, like, what has helped you? You mentioned you focused more on it. I'm just kind of curious, like, what are some things that you did to help you kind of, I guess, tighten it up, hone in, let others know, anything like that. Like, I know for me on my side of the house, like, I do wholesale as well. Um, and it's kind of, and in some cases it's great, like locally, yeah, it's great, but like obviously you want the wholesale, and in your world, kind of, you want the wholesale that goes like, I'm going to another state, I'm shipping it out to you, because I want more people to see it, and the more people that can see my brand or my business, the better. So were there anything that you've done to kind of help, or tips or things that you've noticed, like, hey, I noticed when I started doing more of this, it's kind of provided or allowed for more people to see, or anything like that. And I'm doing it selfishly for me, but also for anyone who is a creative and wants to kind of grow, because I do think that that is a untapped area if you're not taking advantage of, that you really should, as a small business who especially creates products that can be, provided and sold in other places. I definitely think it's like, that is, you need that outlet. It's a great way to grow your business. It's almost like passive income in some ways, is how I look at it. It's just bonus, extra money. Okay, yeah, I'll give you my stuff for extra money. So I kind of wanted to get a little bit, if you can kind of share a little bit, if you can with me, that would be great.
Absolutely. So, for anyone starting out, I think focusing on a local level is a perfect way and a great way, necessary way to start. I will give a shout out to Brittany at the Owl's Attic and to Christy at House on Lang. They were two of my first local Orlando stockists. So, at first, I didn't start with wholesale. I first started with a commission-based partnership locally. I think that's a wonderful place to start.
Yeah.
But as that continued to grow and as people began to see my work around town, that's when the wholesale inquiries started to pour in. At first, I was doing a really scrappy sort of thing on Google Sheets, but then I opened Fair, and that was coinciding when I finally published my own website. I went onto Shopify. The analytics were there. Things just started to become really seamless in its own ecosystem on Shopify.
Yep.
But Fair was so great. It continues to be great. The commissions kind of feel like a stab to the heart sometimes, but at the end of the day, to get to the level I'm right now in over 100 shops in around 40 states and in Canada too. And there is no way that I would have been able to get there
Yeah.
without Fair,
Yeah.
really simply said. But as far as on a logistical level and marketing level about like how to find these places, a lot of the people are finding me through Fair. I will say that, but I always love to ask family and friends whenever they're out traveling or even in their own local neighborhood. I have family and friends scattered all throughout the state, so I like to take a moment sometimes to just individually message them saying, what are some shops that you think SoulShine would be great in? And then I reach out directly to these shops, and it's really great because you have a local person who loves that shop. You can name drop them. Sometimes they know them by face, and it's a really, word of mouth will forever, in my opinion, be the most important type of marketing
Yep.
ever. So I will always do that. And then I would say every quarter, I will ask my followers, where's a store that you would like to see SoulShine products in, local or in your favorite like city destination. And I've gotten many leads from that and many really, really cherished stockists from just simple questions. So that's
That
my
is
way of doing things.
that is gold, and I agree 100%. That's kind of one I do that, and then there's even for me a lot of times I end up start following a lot of the different brands or businesses that I find, because obviously I'm food related, so anything I find
Mhm.
that's food related that I find interesting, I'll be like, oh, this is cool, I want to follow them, and then I'll introduce myself, or I'll even interact with them, and then they'll be able to go into my website and see, and that's another option to be able to kind of do and create that interaction with them. But I love that. I think that's great. I love one of the reasons. This is also one of the reasons. Besides, like I know we were talking before we started recording. Like I love the fact that because like you and I've had some small and short interactions, but not really long, meaningful. Like I feel like this is more, a more meaningful conversation,
Mhm.
and it's one of the reasons why I love doing this. But I also love doing this because there's a lot of things that we know or we know we need to do that we don't do, but it's so different when someone else tells you. It's kind of like almost like, I don't know, I have a teenage daughter, and sometimes I can tell my teenage daughter till I'm blue in the face something. But if someone else tells my teenage daughter's like, hey, well, this is a great idea. And I'll be like, well, I was telling you that, but you didn't listen. But you know, and she does, honey, I love you. Um, I feel sometimes you kind of need to hear it again. So I love your advice when it comes to that. Um, at the same time, I will go with, and since I want to be able to wrap up with you, is what advice would you have for someone wanting to start something, which kind of goes probably very similar to probably your first thing that you've ever designed. Not that at least I'm assuming that's going to be an answer. But I'm kind of curious, like in general cases, if you're wanting to start something, regardless of what it is, what advice would you have for someone?
Okay, for sure. I think there's gonna be a few repeats of a few little tangents that I went on,
That's okay.
in the past hour. Okay, first, jump in with 2 feet and do not hesitate. You have to simply start somewhere. Um, I One of my favorite songs, this is right during the time of when I put SoulShine out into the world. Rue Haynes, I think he's uh, an Australian artist, I don't know, singer. I might be getting that totally wrong, but he has a lyric in one of his songs called Little Giant, and it is start small, grow tall. And he says it often in this particular song, and that was another phrase that was at the forefront of my mind alongside all those other phrases that I just said. But start small, grow tall. It doesn't have to be this perfectly manicured idea. It won't be. That's the thing, is that it won't be perfectly manicured. It might never be. But you have to start somewhere, and then you will grow tall in time. And again, to loop it all back together, there's just so much to learn from stepping outside, seeing things grow. Nature doesn't rush. You can't rush yourself into this perfect, like, blooming flower. You have to just start from the seed.
Is that, out of curiosity, what you just said there? Is that nature doesn't rush? Is that one of your a design of yours?
I have tend to the garden. You know what? I sometimes I don't think I have that one in particular in mind. I have,
I'm
maybe that
just
will be the
saying.
next one.
I'm just saying that, like, you got some good ones in there. I'm gonna definitely make sure to re-listen to this podcast and write down some notes of things you say, because sometimes that's what happens. You say things and you're like, I don't even know where I got that from. Um, where can people where can people follow you? Where can they shop? Where can they see your work? Obviously it's going to be in the show notes, but I figure if people are listening, they're probably scrolling, and I want them to be able to kind of go in and start and do immediately start following you and kind of get a little bit more to get to know you a little bit more on social.
Well, thank you. Instagram is the SoulShine Co. My website is a soulshine.co, not com. And as far as shopping, you can shop online. If you're local, you can just shoot me a message, and I can drop off the goods to you. But market season is going to start for me in late October. I'll be popping up around Orlando and St. Pete so far. Also, I think St. Augustine.
Nice.
But I have a wholesale stockist tab on my website and a local Orlando section. And I would always say support those amazing businesses. They are near and dear to my heart. They have been one of my day one supporters here in Orlando, and to definitely stop by their shops and shop local.
I love it. I love it. I think that's a great way to end this. Natalia, I really appreciate you taking the time for being on with me and chatting with me. I know by the way, I know this is her first podcast and she crushed it. So I hope you get invited to many more, especially even larger ones than mine. But I definitely appreciate you being on, being a guest today. That's our show for today. Please, definitely check out, and thank you so much for having lunch with me. Definitely, if do me a favor and please check out SoulShine Co. And check out Natalia and everything that she's doing. Definitely give them a follow, do some shopping. If you do buy anything, I know I keep saying this till I'm blue in the face, but who does not enjoy seeing a picture of, like, if you go to a store and you see your stuff, take a picture, tag her on it. If you buy something, take a picture with it and take a selfie with it, or who knows, tag someone and tell someone. If regardless of, it's my brand, Natalia's brand, if there is a small business that you like, take a picture. It takes 5 seconds to spread the word. We've both said it. It is the most important thing in the world, word of mouth. Take 5 seconds this weekend when you hear this. Heck, I don't care while you're listening to this, and go share a post of one of your favorite places, but do something to that to help another small business. If you enjoy the podcast, definitely make sure to subscribe, tell your friends. If you want to support me, check out my brand, Deli Fresh Threads. But thank you. Until next time, keep eating sandwiches and follow your passion.